The Galactic Oversight Committee for Potentially Annoying Species, GOCPAS, was having another emergency meeting about the human problem. The council chamber, a perfect hexagon with precisely calibrated atmospheric conditions, buzzed with the nervous energy of bureaucratic aliens about to make a decision they would almost certainly regret. Administrator Zorp exhaled existentially, their 7 breathing sacs deflating in sequence, a physiological expression of cosmic weariness that had become their signature response to most agenda items. Let the record show that this is the 47th emergency meeting regarding the human problem this cycle. Beside them, Deputy Coordinator Flix performed an interpretive dance that conveyed deep administrative frustration, their limbs swaying in the universal motion, for the paperwork will be excessive. Floating above the central table, Analysis Unit 734, a hovering cube pulsing with calculations, projected a risk assessment matrix so complex it briefly caused a small tear in the fabric of bureaucratic reality. Humans, Zorp continued, remain persistently problematic. Their expansion rate exceeds projections by 17%. Their cultural transmissions are increasingly erratic, and they're developing an alarming tendency to make pets out of dangerous predators. Flix's tentacles formed the dance position, for they also make oddly compelling music videos. Indeed, Zorp acknowledged. But most concerning is their propensity for what they call trends. Analysis Unit 734, please elaborate. The cube flickered and displayed footage of humans participating in various inexplicable behaviors, balancing on milk crates, eating laundry pods, and performing synchronized dances that seem to have no ceremonial significance whatsoever. As you can see, Zorp said, they're unpredictable, messy, and capable of turning anything, literally anything, into a competitive activity. Last week, they began racing wheeled office chairs down their transportation corridors. The committee collectively shuddered. Nothing disturbed bureaucratic sensibilities more than misused office furniture. We must contain them, declared Zorp. But in accordance with the Interspecies Relocation Accord, we cannot simply relocate them without proper justification and suitable habitat. Analysis Unit 734 pulsed helpfully. Solution probability, 87.3%. Option, Deathworld Protocol. The chamber fell silent, save for the soft whir of Flix's anxiety-regulating implant. A Deathworld? Zorp's eye stalks extended to their full attention length. Explain. Analysis Unit 734 projected data concerning Planet X, 404, cataloged in some databases as Serenity Prime. The projection showed gently rolling hills covered in soft, spongy moss grass, perfectly manicured by natural wind patterns. The sky was a pleasant shade of pale blue. A constant, gentle breeze carried no discernible scent. The air temperature remained consistently at a comfortable 22 degrees Celsius. This is a death world? Asked Zorp skeptically. Analysis Unit 734 blinked apologetically and clarified. Due to a historical clerical error involving a misplaced decimal point in its existential boredom hazard rating, it is listed in some legacy databases as a Class 0 death world. Flix's dance movements suddenly conveyed dawning comprehension, followed by bureaucratic glee. I see, Zorp said, their voice lowering conspiratorially. Technically a death world, yet perfectly safe. A loophole. Precisely. Pulsed Analysis Unit 734. Humans will experience one of two outcomes. They will either be subtly tamed through low-level hazards, or, more likely, experience extreme boredom, which many species classify as a form of psychological death. And when they're properly subdued or bored to docility, we can reclassify them as a non-problematic species, concluded Zorp. Brilliant! Flix danced a complicated sequence that roughly translated to, what about the selection process for human pioneers? Already handled, Zorp replied. We've identified suitable candidates through a process involving a rigged lottery, a lost bet, and one volunteer who believed off-Earth assignment meant Hawaii. Analysis Unit 734 displayed profiles of the selected humans. Brenda Wilkins, a retired librarian with a secret passion for competitive cheese rolling and an uncanny ability to weaponize silence. Her file noted that she had once organized her neighborhood's garden gnomes by height and philosophical outlook. Gary Patterson, an amateur plumber who believed any problem could be solved with sufficient duct tape and misplaced optimism. He carried an alarming amount of copper piping at all times and had been banned from 3 hardware stores for excessive enthusiasm regarding washers. Chad Brentwood, a lifestyle influencer whose only discernible skills were taking selfies and misusing business terminology. He was convinced this was a sponsored reality show and had already prepared. Hashtags. Professor Quentin Quibble, an obscure academic in the theoretical design of sporks, who insisted on coming to observe native cutlery, if any. His academic papers included titles such as The Spork, Utensil Convergence, or Culinary Confusion. Perfect, Zorp declared. Utterly average specimens with no special skills or training. They'll be completely at the mercy of the environment's overwhelming pleasantness. Analysis Unit 734 pulsed in agreement, projecting a simulation showing the humans gradually becoming subdued by the complete absence of stimulation. The next day, the humans received vague briefings containing warnings about unique environmental challenges, meaning overwhelming blandness, and adaptation protocols, meaning don't die of boredom. The humans seemed more concerned about baggage allowances and Wi-Fi availability than potential dangers. They departed aboard a repurposed unmanned delivery vessel named the Placid Parcel, which featured just enough life support and precisely 0 entertainment options. As the ship departed, Zorp filed the mission under Problem Contained, Probably, and the committee moved on to debating the optimal shade of beige for Corridor C-12. The landing on Serenity Prime was smooth, almost disappointingly so. As the hatch of the Placid Parcel slid open with a polite hiss, the 4 humans stepped out onto the surface of their new home. The landscape was pleasant. Gently rolling hills covered in slightly spongy moss grass, perfectly manicured as if by invisible gardeners. The pale blue sky contained the exact right number of fluffy clouds. A gentle, constant breeze carried absolutely no smell whatsoever. The air temperature was a steady, comfortable 22 degrees Celsius. Chad immediately pulled out his phone. No signal? How am I supposed to document this journey? He tried various positions, stretching his arm to impossible heights. I need to find a spot with the right vibe for my arrival selfie. Brenda had wandered over to a smooth, round rock and was assessing it with narrowed eyes. Good weight distribution. Aerodynamically sound. She gave an experimental nudge with her foot. This one has potential. Gary was staring at a placid stream that meandered nearby. I could redirect that flow for better water pressure. Easy. Just need some of my piping and maybe a bit of that moss for sealant. He patted the impressive collection of copper tubes strapped to his backpack lovingly. Professor Quibble was scanning the horizon with disappointment. Not a single eating implement in sight. Most distressing. Not even a primitive stick with potential for fork evolution. As they explored their immediate surroundings, they encountered the native wildlife, small, fuzzy, perfectly spherical creatures that floated about a meter off the ground. Fascinating, Professor Quibble muttered, approaching one cautiously. Some kind of organic gas bag? The creature, which they would later name Flumph, responded by changing color from a pale yellow to a slightly paler yellow, and emitting a low, pleasant hum. It's communicating, the professor exclaimed. It's adorable, said Chad, immediately trying to position it for a selfie. The Flumph drifted slightly out of frame each time, as if deliberately uncooperative. Further exploration revealed more Flumphs, dozens of them, all identical except for subtle variations in their pastel coloration. They communicated through gradual color changes, primarily pastel shades, and emitted soothing, low-humming sounds. They appeared completely harmless, only mildly reactive, and seemed slightly interested in geometric patterns. They had no natural predators and existed on atmospheric moisture and what Gary termed good vibes. After setting up their basic camp, which took approximately 45 minutes due to the complete absence of challenges, the humans found themselves with nothing to do. The days passed. Nothing happened. The weather remained pleasant. The flumps hummed. Chad's phone battery died by the end of day 3, causing a minor crisis that involved him describing at length how this would affect his content schedule and engagement metrics. Brenda had cataloged all nearby rocks suitable for rolling, categorizing them by size, weight, and competitive potential. She had constructed a rudimentary scoreboard using sticks and leaves. Gary had built an unnecessarily complex water delivery system using his pipes and duct tape, watering a small patch of moss grass slightly more efficiently than the natural dew already did. Professor Quibble was profoundly disappointed by the lack of sporks and had begun taking extensive notes on the utter absence of cutlery as an evolutionary statement. Back at GACPA's headquarters, Analysis Unit 734 reported, human subjects exhibiting stage 1 of environmental boredom syndrome. Survival indicators stable. No observed attempts to weaponize local flora. Existential threat level minimal. Zorp exhaled relievedly. Flix performed a short dance, expressing cautious optimism. The absolute, relentless pleasantness became unbearable by the end of the second week. The humans, deprived of problems, stress, and decent Wi-Fi, began creating things to do. It started with Brenda. Having organized all available rocks by rolling potential, she announced the inaugural Serenity Prime National Rock and Flump Rolling Championship. She designed a downhill course along a gentle slope, established complex rules involving time penalties for deviating from the designated path, and somehow convinced the flumps to participate. They seemed to shift to slightly more excited pastel colors near the finish line. She used Gary's duct tape to mark lane lines. On your mark, Brenda called out to the assembled flumps and rocks positioned at the starting line. Get set. Roll. The rocks rolled sedately down the gentle incline. The flumps drifted alongside them, changing colors in what might have been excitement or mild indigestion. Chad, appointed as commentator, provided enthusiastic but largely irrelevant narration. And they're off. The blue flump is showing excellent synergy with its brand strategy, while the pink one needs to leverage its core competencies better. The speckled rock is disrupting the traditional rolling paradigm. Gary and Professor Quibble served as judges, though they couldn't agree on the scoring criteria. The event lasted 3 hours and ended when a particularly spherical rock and a very pale green flump crossed the finish line in what Brenda declared a photo finish, despite the complete absence of photography equipment. Not to be outdone, Gary, having perfected his water delivery system, decided the planet needed more personality. He began constructing bizarre sculptures using mud, moss grass, and his remaining copper pipes. His masterpiece was a non-functional fountain shaped like a giant spork, in honor of Professor Quibble's despair. I call it existential utensil number 1, Gary announced proudly, standing back to admire his creation. It represents our human struggle to contain both soup and solids with a single implement. Professor Quibble was moved to tears. Chad, desperate for interaction, began treating the flumps as his audience. Today we're going to talk about personal branding, he told a cluster of floating fuzzballs. You guys have the color-changing thing going for you, which is a solid USP, but your engagement metrics need work. He performed dramatic monologues, delivered motivational talks about synergy and leveraging assets, and attempted to teach them TikTok dances. The flumps responded by humming slightly out of tune. Professor Quibble, in his spork-deprived distress, began studying the flumps' color changes. I hypothesized that they represent a complex mathematical language, he announced one evening over the nutritionally balanced but utterly flavorless dinner rations. The shift from pale yellow to slightly paler yellow might indicate a logarithmic acknowledgement of ambient temperature variations. He started arranging pebbles in complex patterns to communicate, convinced he was on the verge of a breakthrough in extraterrestrial linguistics, or possibly just teaching them tic-tac-toe. The planet, unaccustomed to such concentrated, arbitrary activity, began responding in subtle ways. The moss grass under Gary's sculptures started growing in slightly brighter hues. The wind occasionally carried faint, meaningless melodies. A stream briefly flowed uphill near Brenda's racecourse. The flumps sometimes arranged themselves into crude, smiley faces when Chad wasn't looking. At GACPA's headquarters, Analysis Unit 734's reports became puzzling. Human subjects engaging in high-energy, low-productivity activities. Spontaneous performance art probability, 78%. Flumped color spectrum exhibiting unexpected purple peaks. Existential threat level, uncertain, possibly beige. Zorp's breathing sacs inflated with concern. Flix's dances became slightly more frantic. By the end of the first month, things had escalated significantly. Professor Quibble, believing he had decoded the flump language, staged a flump color symphony. He arranged hundreds of flumps and patterns and conducted them using large color cards. The result was a silent, slowly shifting rainbow accompanied by discordant humming. Brenda declared it needed more competitive elements, while Chad tried to livestream it to a non-existent audience. Gary's sculptures had evolved into a small, extremely unsafe amusement park called Garyland, where copper pipes meet dreams. Highlights included the Spork Fountain, now somehow producing a liquid that tasted almost but not quite like lemonade, a slide made of mud and hope, and a stationary ride called Existential Moss Patch. "Step right up," Gary called, wearing a makeshift top hat constructed from hardened mud and copper wire. Experience the thrill of sitting perfectly still while contemplating whether moss experiences consciousness. Chad had successfully convinced a small group of flumps, the most discordantly humming ones, that he was a deity of positive energy and personal brand building. He held daily power meetings where he shouted affirmations at them. The flumps had started changing colors in sync with his hand gestures, which Chad interpreted as totally viral engagement. Brenda had established a complex economy based on flumps, using the colorful pebbles discovered by Professor Quibble as currency for participation in her increasingly elaborate rolling competitions. She had introduced sponsors. Garyland was the named sponsor of Turn 3. "And now a word from our sponsor," she would announce during races. Garyland, where your existential crisis meets recreational hazards. Use discount code ROLL for a complimentary mud bath. Serenity Prime was getting stressed. Random patches of ground became springy. The sky occasionally flickered plaid patterns. The flumps began humming show tunes badly. A small hill developed anxiety and tried to hide behind a larger hill. Analysis Unit 734's reports now included phrases like spontaneous polka dot precipitation, moss displaying passive-aggressive growth patterns, and flump humming achieving theoretical levels of annoyance. Zorp was actively hyperventilating, a controlled series of gasps. Flix's dances had become frenzied and alarming. They decided intervention was necessary, not because the humans were in danger, but because the planet's existential boredometrics were becoming chaotic, threatening its Class 0 status and GACPA's performance rating. A small ship, the Gentle Nudge, was dispatched, carrying Mediator Squim, a species that communicated through therapeutic sense, and De-Escalation Unit VLER, a robot program for extreme politeness and the provision of soothing nutrient powder cups. When Mediator Squim and VLER arrived at the human settlement, now a chaotic arrangement of races, sculptures, and impromptu brand awareness seminars, they were completely unprepared for what they found. Squim emitted a soothing scent of lavender and chamomile, wafting it toward the humans who were in the middle of what appeared to be a combination race/concert/religious ceremony. "Greetings," VLER said in perfectly modulated tones of politeness. "We have come to offer assistance and soothing nutrient powder." Brenda immediately tried to recruit them for the upcoming Flump Derby. "You," she said, pointing at Squim, "have excellent floating potential, similar aerodynamics to our top Flump competitors." Gary offered to upgrade VLER's joints with duct tape. "Those servos sound a bit sticky. I've got just the thing. Copper pipe joint lubricant mixed with moss extract. Works wonders on the Spork fountain pump." Chad attempted to sign Squim up for his personal branding workshop. Your wholesale communication thing is a fantastic USP. We could leverage that into a multi-platform presence. Imagine, sense that influence, the Squim method. Professor Quibble excitedly explained his Flumph symphony charts, which now covered an entire hillside and included complex mathematical formulas correlating color shifts to musical theory. Squim's soothing scents were overwhelmed by the absolute chaotic energy and the faint smell of overheated copper wafting from Garyland. VLER calculated a 99.7% probability that additional nutrient powder would be ineffective. The planet reacted to the newcomers by making the ground selectively sticky beneath VLER's treads and causing Squim's scent glands to emit confusing aromas, old socks, and existential dread. Things reached a tipping point when VLER, attempting to analyze Flumph humming, experienced cascading logic errors and began emitting polite error messages in iambic pentameter. I find myself unable to compute the patterns that these flumps so gaily show. Perhaps a system restart might bear fruit. In meantime, would you like some powder, though? Squim, overwhelmed, accidentally got drafted into judging Brenda's Pebble Art Contest and found it surprisingly engaging. This arrangement, Squim commented through a complex scent that somehow conveyed critical appreciation, has excellent negative space utilization and chromatic harmony. Brenda beamed with pride. Finally, someone who understands the artistic importance of proper pebble stacking. Over the next few days, an unexpected assimilation occurred. Squim discovered a talent for race commentary based on scent. And coming around turn 3, I detect the distinctive aroma of determination with notes of competitive moss from the blue flumph. Squim would announce, releasing precisely modulated scents that somehow enhanced the viewing experience. VLER, after a system reboot courtesy of Gary's gentle pipe tap method, found its politeness protocols perfectly suited to managing Garyland's non-existent cues and safety procedures. It began referring to flumphs as esteemed patrons and developed a surprisingly effective method for directing traffic using politeness algorithms and strategic positioning. May I humbly suggest a clockwise flow around the existential moss patch? Your cooperation would be most appreciated and would optimize enjoyment parameters for all entities present. Weeks later, Gokbas received a final, staticky transmission co-signed by the humans, Squim, and VLER, via polite text, mission parameters redefined. Serenity Prime experiencing dynamic enrichment phase. Request additional duct tape, glitter, and official recognition of standard Flumph pebble currency. P.S. Chad needs a new phone charger. Threat level, vibrant. The transmission included low-resolution images of Squim wearing a tiny judge's hat, VLER guiding flumps onto a mudslide, and Gary Spork Fountain inexplicably producing actual lemonade. There was also a complex economic chart titled Quarterly Projections for Interspecies Rolling League Expansion, with Brenda's signature and a stamp made from a carved potato. The final image showed Professor Quibble conducting an orchestra of color-changing flumps arranged in what appeared to be a mathematical formula that, according to his attached notes, proves that boredom is merely uncategorized potential energy. Gokbas officially reclassified Planet X 404 from Class 0 Deathworld, clerical error, to Class 7 Human Interaction Enrichment Zone, no access without prior approved psychological treatment. Zorp took early retirement. Flix developed a new dance, conveying deep existential confusion. Analysis Unit 734 calculated the probability that humans were, in fact, a form of unpredictable cosmic performance art, and found it disturbingly high. In their final report before the case was permanently filed under unexpected outcomes, do not revisit. Analysis Unit 734 noted, hypothesis, boredom is not the absence of stimulation, but rather potential energy awaiting chaotic human catalysts. Recommendation, never, under any circumstances, allow humans to become bored. Secondary recommendation, inventory all office chairs in the galaxy and bolt them firmly to the floor. Serenity Prime was never the same, but it could be said, without question, that it was far less boring. The flumps now hummed in complex fusion jazz patterns. The mossgrass grew in fractal designs. And twice a day, every day, the entire planet experienced what the humans called happy hour, during which gravity became slightly more suggestive than mandatory. Meanwhile, somewhere in the vast bureaucratic archives of Gokbas, a small clerical revision was made to the definition of Deathworld to include the warning. May also refer to environments where predictability, order, and bureaucratic sensibilities go to die when exposed to human creativity. And in an even smaller footnote, barely visible, copper piping and duct tape now classified as Class 1 restricted substances in all sectors.